Alright, so this is a tutorial on how to solve just a basic accounting equation. The equation starts out and says, on June 6th, Southside Bank and Trust lent $100,000 to Sherry Silverthorne on a 90-day 7% note. The first requirement is journalize for Southside the lending of the money on June 6th. And the second requirement, it says journalize the collection of the principal and interest at maturity. Specify the date, round to the nearest dollar. So we will be solving this equation. It's pretty simple. Just follow these steps and I'm going to show you how to do it step by step. So here's the equation, the first part of the equation solved. Notes receivable, sometimes called promissory notes, represent a written promise that a borrower will pay a fixed amount of principal plus interest by a certain date in the future, called the maturity date. The maturity date is the date on which the notes receivables is due. So for this journal entry, Southside Bank and Trust lent $100,000 to Sherry Silverthorne on a 90-day 7% note. When a bank loans money to a customer, a receivable must be set up for the client for the amount of the loan. So you're going to journalize the awarding of the loan. And this you would use for June 6th, because that's the date. You would debit notes receivable to Sherry Silverthorne of $100,000, and you would credit cash of $100,000. Explanation is you lent money to Sherry Silverthorne. And some background information. The fee which must be paid for the privilege of borrowing money is called interest. The amount of interest revenue earned is determined by the interest rate. Interest rates are the percentage of the loan amount that must be paid per year. Often companies do not need to pay interest for the entire year. Interest revenue is calculated for the portion of a year that a note is outstanding. Okay, so requirement 2 says journalize the collection of the principal and interest maturity. Specify the date first. So when the loan is due, the bank will receive the principal plus the interest that the bank charges its customers for the privilege of borrowing money. Before we can record the entry, we must calculate the payment date. Recall that the loan is awarded on June 6th, and it is for 90 days. When the period is given in days, the maturity date is determined by counting the number of days from the date of issue, which is count the maturity date, but omit the date that the note was issued. Therefore, a note that matures in 90 days will mature on September 4th. Now we can calculate the interest. Remember, Southside Bank and Trust lent $100,000 to Sherry Silverthorne on a 90-day 7% note. When the length of the note is satisfied in days, remember to take the length of the note in the problem and divide it by the full amount of days, 365. For example, 10 days would look like 10 divided by 365 in the time portion of the formula. So, you would multiply the principal, which is $100,000, times the interest rate of 7%, times 90 over 365, which would equal 1,726, and that is the amount of interest. Now that we have calculated the interest due, we can calculate the total amount due from Sherry Silverthorne, which you plug in the notes receivable from Sherry Silverthorne, which was the $100,000, plus the interest due of the $1,726, and that would equal the total amount due from her, which would be $101,726. So what you're going to do is record the payment of the loan. When the bank records the payment of the loan, it must separate the principal portion from the interest portion. Using the amounts you determined above, journalize the company's collection of the principal and interest all maturity. Specify the date as determined. So here's requirement 2 solved. The date is September 4th, which we figured out from our calculations above. The notes receivable from Sherry Silverthorne obviously was the $100,000, and we figured out the interest revenue of the 1726, and you're going to add those two together to get the cash, and you're going to debit the cash. And that's how much you are receiving from her. And then you're all done. That's it. Thank you for watching it. Hope you know how to solve this accounting equation for interest.